Stay. Don't move. Don't. Hello, friendos. This is Chain, welcoming you back to Chain of Commander. And for today, I am covered in cat hair. And I think we will cover 5 things that you should not do in a game of Commander. Now, before I go over these 5 things, a list like this is bound to be subjective, and what might be acceptable for some might not be unacceptable for others, and vice versa. That is perfectly fine. If you don't agree with anything I say on this list, don't worry about it. It's my opinion. You have your opinion. I'd actually love to hear your side of the fence if we don't agree on something. But that said, let's kind of go over these 5 things here. Maybe you do resonate with them, maybe you don't. Only one way to find out. The first thing that you should not do when playing EDH is complain about being targeted if you are clearly the biggest threat at the table. Now look, I get it. You want your deck to do its thing. It's pretty much why we play EDH. But there are going to be plenty of times where your deck is doing its thing a lot better than everybody else at the table. And they are going to recognize that, and they're going to start targeting you as the threat accordingly. This is not a reason to complain or throw a hissy fit about this. Sure, they're going to start interacting with you and start holding you back from doing what you want to do, but you should be treating that as a sign of respect. Now, I'm not saying that you need to sit there and just take it from them. You are perfectly allowed to try to talk your way out, convince them that you're not as much of a threat as you appear to be, and stuff like that, to really kind of maybe position yourself politically better at the table. But if you're showing any of the signs of being the major threat, and there are a variety of signs for this. You could have the most developed board state. You could be playing a commander that is known to just win out of nowhere. You could be representing a combo with several pieces on the table. There could be a variety of reasons why your opponents are tagging up to team up against you. But don't complain about it. In fact, for my opinion, you need to own that position. As soon as you become the threat at the table, you get to be arch enemy. You get to play the bad guy. I mentioned this back when I did my Zozu tech. It is fun to be the bad guy sometime and watching a whole table team up against you just to try to bring you down a peg. When you win in those situations, it feels so much better knowing that you get to win between essentially what is a 3 against 1 and a game of arch enemy. And it's just a very satisfactory feeling. And it's perfectly fine to be the bad guy once in a while. Don't complain if you are going to be the bad guy. Own it. The next one I want to cover here is more of a time-saving measure than anything, and that is, do not waste your opponent's turns not thinking about what you are going to do on your turn. Magic is a complicated game. There are a bajillion decision trees at any given time. However, you always have an amount of information that you can work with to start making your decisions at a time. As soon as you pass your turn, you know what you have in hand, you know what resources you have available on the table, and you know what threats your opponents are representing on their boards. You should start planning your next turn accordingly. Let's say you have a couple spells in hand. You could look at those and be like, all right, if my opponent continues representing this threat, I will use this piece of removal on them. Or if nobody has a threat by my next turn, I will cast this piece to advance my board state. Maybe even plan ahead a little bit further. It's like, oh, if I draw a land for turn, that means I can play this spell. If I don't, then I will play that spell. Point is, nobody wants to wait for you to think about every possible combination after you draw your card. You should have at least a semblance of an idea of what you're going to do by the time the turn rotates back to you. It'll save plenty of time in the pod. It'll keep the pod moving at a reasonable pace, and I am certain that your opponents will appreciate the decisiveness and the preparedness that you represent by planning ahead accordingly. And you know what I would appreciate? I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, especially if you like the video I'm doing here. You know, it helps with the formula, the YouTube formula, the YouTube algorithm, which is kind of my arch enemy at this time in life. So anything you do to help me out, I'd appreciate. That said, let's kind of keep going on here because I got a couple here that really, they stick together pretty well. The next one I have is, well, everybody really knows that one player that makes all their decisions by rolling the die. Don't do that. Obviously, there's some exceptions for things that declare at random, like Ruhan or Vial Smasher. But if you have a choice to make, think out the choice. Don't just leave it to a roll of a die. Always think about the pros and cons of attacking. Let's say you have all your players, all of them have no blockers, all of them have advantageous attacks for you. Think about which one will pose the biggest threat to you sooner, or which one poses the biggest threat to you later, or maybe even just all other things even. Just attack the person who went first. Or if you don't have any advantageous attacks, just don't attack at all. But don't just roll a die to determine. Think your plays through. Have rationale behind all of your actions, and it will actually make you a better player because of it. Now, the next one I have for you is actually kind of like the flip side of that coin, or die. And that is, if somebody does roll the dice to kind of make their decisions, don't let them hide behind that like some sort of defense mechanism. If they attack you because they decided to roll the die and the die said to attack you, treat that just as much as you would treat a decided attack against you. They made the decision to roll the die. They should be held accountable for whatever that outcome might be. Some people, they roll the die to kind of go, hey, it wasn't me who attacked you, the dice decided. You shouldn't be mad at me, but they were the one who decided to roll the die in the first place. Do not let those die rollers out there hide behind the randomness of their actions to make them feel like they are not to be held responsible. They are equally as responsible for the outcome of the die as they would be of making any other choice. If you have a friend who rolls the die and then tries to talk their way out of their actions because of it, call them out. Let them know that you will not be having any of it, and they will feel the full wrath of your board at the earliest opportunity. And you know what I like to feel? I feel pretty good, on the other hand, when you hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you folks join us going forward just to talk things, all things Commanders, from deck text to deck building advice to random things like this, where we just talk about the do's and don'ts of the format. So hit that subscribe button. Love to have you folks join us. Now we got one more for you as well. One last thing that I think you should not do in a game of Commander, and it is the most important to me. So let's just get to it. The last thing I want to talk about, and this is overall the most important thing to me in games of EDH that you should not do, and that is do not go back on your word. EDH, beyond any other constructed format like Modern or Legacy or Standard or whatnot, has politics involved. You can wheel, you can deal, you can make agreements, you can bargain, you can haggle, you can make alliances, and you can make enemies. It adds a social layer to a format that no other format has. But with this social layer comes social responsibilities, because we live in a society. You may make an agreement with somebody, and just because it's not a legally binding agreement, just because you didn't sign a contract, doesn't necessarily mean that there are no repercussions for breaking that agreement. Just like Billy Joel said, it's a matter of trust. And as soon as you break your word with somebody, it's really hard to gain that trust back. And that can lead to more complicated situations for you in the future where you really would benefit from making a bargain, but people don't trust you anymore. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that you can't be tricky about your agreements. In fact, I am of the opinion that I like to be very literal with wording. Let's say, for example, somebody has a planeswalker they want to keep around and I want it gone, and the person proposes an agreement. I'd say, okay, I will not attack your planeswalker if you do this thing for me. And then they do that thing for me. And then I don't. It gets to my turn and I uphold my side of the agreement. I do not attack their planeswalker. Instead, I'll cast Hero's Downfall on it and just kill it that way. Now, some of you out there might say, hey, that's bad. You didn't hold your side of the agreement. But I say, nay, I did exactly what was agreed upon, and I did not attack him. Now, this what we're talking about right now, really comes down to the letter versus the spirit of the law. And that is really a philosophical discussion that's well beyond an EDH YouTube channel. That's for philosophers and stuff. This is where I want to hear from you folks. I want to know, what are the big no-nos for you when it comes to playing with your friends, with people at a store, with people you've never met before? What are things that you do not do at the table? What are things that you do not want your opponents to do at the table? Definitely let me know in the comments below. I'm sure everybody has a varying array of opinions on this particular topic. Beyond that, thank you very much for joining me today. I really like hanging out with you folks, and I'll see you guys again in the future.